Welcome, everybody. This is interview number 7. Can you believe it? Number 7, and they're going great. And it's my great pleasure to present to you someone who I'll introduce in a minute, but I just want to go through a little bit of a bio, certainly a racing bio. We've got Kate Perry with us, and Kate currently races for the NRS Specialised Women's Racing Team. She's been competing in the NRS since 2014, and she's got a significant palmarès, like currently Oceania ITT champion, finished third in that event as well, and second over the years. Third in Road Nats ITT in 2017 and 19. Third in the KOM at this year's Lexus of Blackburn Women's Herald Sun Tour. Third in the Women's Grafton Timberell last year. In the past, won the Tour of the King Valley, Mersey Valley Tour, Tour of Bright, way back, won the Warburton Road Race. We're talking about significant achievements at a local level. And she's a Brunswick girl through and through, and she's a really, really interesting person I've been waiting to interview. Balances life between road racing and working as a cycling coach and a lecturer of sport and exercise science at La Trobe Uni, and as we'll find out, a lot more. Kate, welcome, and thank you for agreeing to do this interview.
Thank you, Ag. I didn't realize it was number 7 already. I think you're clocking up the interviews very nicely, and I was very much on board and interested as soon as I saw the first one with Sarah. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be able to jump on board and have a chat.
Thank you. Well, look, let's start with informal, a bit casual. It's Monday. It's the start of the week. How was your weekend? Because a few of us were able to get out in such a beautiful, beautiful weekend of weather.
Yeah, definitely. I chose to make the most of both days out on the bike. I started off my weekend with an indoor session. So we had the second round of the NRS Invitational e-racing series, and it was I guess a bit of a rude introduction to some intensity very early on a Saturday morning, but good fun. And it was actually really nice to just team up with the girls again, and virtually pin a racing number on. And after the first week, I kind of got off the bike and just thought, how on earth is anyone supposed to win one of these races? Like, it's just obscenely hard, and clearly more to it than just pedaling a bike. And and then this week I found myself surprisingly rolling off the front, and I was like, how is this happening? So I think I'm still getting my head around it, but it was good fun. And then as you said, the weather was too good to not go outside, so I did a few hours on the bike, just on some of my favourite roads out near King Lake and the surrounds. Didn't actually go up King Lake because I probably would have fallen off my bike with how tired I was after the race. But beautiful. And then yesterday, my parents live in Yarra Junction now, so I actually drove out there yesterday morning and did the Dirty Donna with Dad, and he hasn't ridden that road yet. So we all went off we went. I was on my roadie, he was on his gravel bike, and I think it was a really nice balance to the weekend, and just really nice to be able to ride with people again. Like, obviously we can have a +1, and we've always had a +1, but I haven't been able to go out and see Mum and Dad until the restrictions have lifted. So it's just been really nice to sort of ease back into a bit of normality, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. And it would have been cold up Donna, but it still would have been magnificent. Such a beautiful ride. Either way, whether you do the gravel, the dirty, or the normal road, it's such a beautiful, beautiful climb. It's great.
I'm very fortunate that I've done that quite a few times now, and probably more as we get back into racing.
So just on that e-racing, because there's a lot of discussion about it, and I remember when the first race was on, I asked for a comment from all of you who competed. Yeah, you said it was like Mario Kart. And you kind of have to learn the power-ups. And I've been doing a few races myself, not at your level, obviously, but it is hard. So it's not easy. But surely the more we do it, the more we just can't wait to get out and do the real thing.
I think so. And I think, the great thing, you have to look at it in a sense of it's replacing road racing at the moment, but it's different. It's a bit of fun. You get that competitive edge, and, you're lining up against people that you normally line up against. And you kind of get to the end and you just think, that was clearly nothing like what we normally have on the road, but that excitement factor doesn't go away regardless of, when you're racing. And I think particularly with, potentially having quite a bit of a challenge with motivation, whilst there's no calendar, this has been, the perfect sort of, I guess, thing to fill the void of no racing. And I'm definitely keen to get stuck back into it on the road. I think, that doesn't change for any athlete really, and that level of excitement's there regardless of whether you're indoors or outdoors. But I'm super keen to to do probably what's going to arguably be a very busy end to the year, I think, if we go according to what the proposed plan is. So.
Yeah, and we've talked about that plan before, and it is rather optimistic, but you need to be optimistic. And, the weekend was clearly one where people could get out more, and most people are responsible. So I think if we all do the right thing, and you've made mention on this on some of your posts as well, thanking Dan Andrews, etc., for the way that it's been handled, and it has been handled really well. And it's a real responsibility of ours to make sure that we continue down that track, because then we can get back to do exactly what we want, and that's what you're talking about. So we're all very keen on that. But I've got to say, just on the Zwift racing, the final word is Matt Keenan, Carly Taylor, Pat Shaw. They're just doing a great job of making it exciting, and that the vision that we're seeing does make it look like you're in a real race. I'm really enjoying that part.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I can mirror that. Obviously, I probably didn't have as luxurious a view as you did on the weekend, but I did have the live stream on our screen at home, and we actually had Mel Ben Steele, who's been doing some media for our team. She popped over she's like, oh, can I take a few shots of you while you're racing? And I thought, oh God, okay, all right. I don't know how these are going to turn out, but yeah, so we had the live stream going, and yeah, the commentary was fantastic, and hats off to Matt and Pat and Carly and, everyone involved in that. It's obviously not easy, but I think I've had people comment, who don't normally necessarily follow all the racing, but now they have access to this live stream on a, Saturday morning, like, work colleagues are even being like, oh yeah, the commentary was great, and that insight, I think it just adds that next element to really making it as realistic as possible. So yeah, I think it's great.
And everybody knew Kate Perry goes up the front and does a big turn. So, nothing was that unusual. It was
blows up and says, I'm not going up that hill as fast as those other women. No, thank you.
Hey, you were introduced to cycling by your dad. You spoke that going up the Dirty Donna with Dad. So your dad, Joe, he introduced you to cycling. I think you were 5 years old. Is that right?
Oh, something like that. Yeah, I think it's funny, I remember riding, I think it was grade 2, hey, do like, on the weekend I did this, your riding task in class. And yeah, I think it was probably about grade 2 that I remember writing about the Brunswick Clinic. So probably a few years before that. Yeah, I think I've been involved with Dad with bikes since I was pretty much able to walk, I think. So yeah.
And Dad, handy bike rider?
Yeah, he is. It's funny, like he's dabbled in a bit of, I guess, club racing from time to time, and he always says, "Oh, I'm not as fast as you," or whatever that may be. But I think like my dad's extremely gifted in terms of his physiology, and that he's got an exceptional VO2 max, and did a lot of running at high school. He's been riding bikes pretty much since he was a kid. And I think like he grew up in Werribee, had to ride to, I'm pretty sure he rode to school in Altona, like I'm sure he'll probably tell you otherwise, but I think that's what the story was. And so he's been riding bikes for years and years, and I learned a lot from him in terms of just enjoying the bike. I think that was the biggest thing. And we used to go on hitchbiker rides and then work up to some longer ones. And he was incredibly patient with me as a junior. And now it's funny. I just really like being able to go out riding with him. Even just like he jokes about, oh, this isn't even a training ride for you. And I said, yeah, but it's equally like something that I enjoy and I love. So it's nice to be able to sort of come back to it again and just enjoy those simple rides. Yeah.
Yeah. I love riding with my daughter. I remember Gracie Elton talking about the same thing with her dad, and I think it's just a wonderful bond. As you become teenagers and dads are no longer cool, at least you can still ride with us, right? And then as you get older, we're cool again. Maybe not sure. So you started racing around 7 or 8 years of age until about 15 at the track.
Yeah. So I started at the Brunswick Cycling Clinic, probably with a lot of other juniors at the club. And yeah, I didn't start racing, I guess, at an open level until under 15, second year under 15s. And I guess I was probably pretty reserved in my start into racing, and that, I really just enjoyed going there on a Sunday. And sometimes, to be honest, when I first started, it was almost, I don't even know if it's because I was an only child or I wasn't as competitive as I probably should have been. But a few times, I'd be like, oh, I don't want to go, and maybe it's me placing too much pressure on myself as a 7-year-old. I don't know what it was. But yeah, over the years, I kind of, had some really good mentors in Alan Grindle and Alf Walker, and, they sort of encouraged me to keep going. And, I remember one of the first awards I ever got at the clinic was the Quiet Achiever Award. And, you know, for someone who had never, like I'd done like swimming at a club level, but nothing, you know, never sort of any team sport. And that was like the first trophy I ever got. And that was the, you know, the end of me not being competitive. After that, I was ready to go and, you know, then started lining up against the boys. And, you know, this is about the time I think the Drapac boys were there, and, you know, racing against, you know, Julian and I think probably developed through all the grades together, and, you know, sitting next to Mitch Docker for years. And, you know, you look back on it now and you're almost fangirling. You're just like, wow, I used to sit next to this amazing athlete every Sunday with my family, you know. And and then I just sort of got involved in more and more open racing, and probably, I think, you know, towards under 17s, under 19s, I kind of realised that track probably wasn't, you know, where I wanted to end up. And I started to do a few road races in the Northern Combines, and then thought, why on earth would anyone want to do this? It's cold and wet. It's really hard, you know, but I sort of stuck at it for a few years. And then I think I just got to the point where I needed a bit of a break. And, took some time away for a few years when I was at uni, and then got back into it sort of post-uni, and here I am. I haven't looked back really.
But, you know, back in those days, there was, back in those days, sounds like a long time ago, doesn't it? But it's really not that long ago, sorry.
You sound very old here, eh?
I know. Oof. I don't know what I'll feel like when I get to your age, Kate. I'm scared. But the scene was different. NJTS didn't exist. Women's only racing was just, you know, every now and then, and so it was completely different. In fact, when you raced at Brunswick, the track hadn't even been resurfaced, and it was still the grey old track, and I mean, it's still got the bumps and everything now. But you can do. I've said to people before, you can do 3 hours of motor pace and climb 250 metres. It's just that sort of a track, right? Even though it's meant to be flat. But times have changed. But I guess the beauty of what it was like then, because I love NJTS and I love the new innovations and the changes, but what I feel has perhaps happened is it's added some pressure. And you talked about just doing it for fun and not taking racing seriously until top age under 15s. What I'm seeing a little bit of now, which concerns me, is that people are getting stressed out about under 15s and even under 17s. And I recall Simon Plapp saying to me, we were standing at the corner of the McIver Highway Harcourt, the Metros, one year, and the kids were taking off, and Luke must have been racing because Simon was there, so it must have been top age under 17. But my daughter had just taken off in under 15s or even 13s, and he said to me, I used to think this was so important, but now I know it's not. So, you know, whilst there's been great change, and you took some time out yourself, how do you feel about the state of the sport at the moment at that level after under 17s, and whether there's enough going on to keep people in it?
Oh, do you mean after under 17s? Transition to... Yeah, look, I think it's an interesting concept, Ag, and, you know, I think it's funny as soon as you mentioned that, you know, you feel as if there's been a shift. The first thing that jumped to mind was I was doing the Eildon tour a few years ago now, and it was when it was a women's tour and a junior tour concurrently, and I remember it was freezing cold, like just horrendous conditions, to the point where I at the time thought, I don't even know if we should be racing this, but, you know, they took obviously very good precautionary measures to make sure we were safe. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, you know, they had a camp, and I remember Pat Lane was one of the mentors for the juniors at the time. And, you know, I've known Pat for years, and he's obviously, you know, a very well-credentialed cyclist and now an incredible DS. And, you know, he was there mentoring these kids, and, you know, they're coming up to him, they're saying things like, oh, you know, like, what should I be doing? What warm-up should I be doing? And, you know, he's just like, just get on your bike and ride, you know. And they're going, oh, do I need velo toes? Do I not need velo toes? And he's like, you don't need the latest and greatest. Just do the little thing, you know, just basically giving them the advice of everything against what they might have thought they needed. But I think, I think there's definitely a sense of pressure, but I think it's also because there's a lot more access to different, you know, facilities and equipment and all of that sort of stuff, with just a difference in, you know, culture and sport in general. Everything's a lot more accessible. So I think inadvertently that places a lot more pressure on people to feel like they have to be a certain way or have the certain equipment and stuff. But, you know, I think it's great that there is that opportunity at junior levels, but there is also the tendency that if you don't have a direct pathway, finding that pathway might be a bit tricky, the junior to senior level, because there is a big jump. And I think the challenge lies within, you need the support around athlete development in general at that age, I think, rather than just say cycling or, having that jump to senior level. And I think in hindsight, part of the reason I took a step away at the time was, as you said, there wasn't really any women's racing or, young women's racing. And I was racing against women who, were arguably 10, 15 years older than me, had that much more just maturity physically, but also, weren't studying, they had a job, they had a bit more stability, I guess. And that was a bit of something that sort of was a barrier for me at the time. I just thought, far out, I just do not have the time and energy to do this. But, if you're able to tap into, I guess, support at an athlete level to help guide you through that big jump, I think that, that's probably where we need to look at support for young riders. And because if you think about it, like under 19s, it's not just sport that's changing, but your whole life's changing. Like, you're graduating from uni, you're navigating year 12, then you get into uni, and then it's a whole new concept. And, then you want to move out of home, so you're going to have a part-time job. And just, I think teaching life skills is probably the biggest challenge. And, we're probably going to touch on it a bit later, but, teaching in first year university in exercise science, I teach a coaching subject, and pretty much that's almost just like a mentoring subject for these students. And I think in hindsight, if we can build the sport up in that capacity and give the, young people an opportunity to access these types of facilities and, infrastructure similar to, say, I guess, that the institutes provide, then I really think that the overall development of those young athletes will just only, increase and benefit them moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. The biggest concern that a few of us have is that there's a lot of pressure put on 15s and 17s, and then you've got all those life changes, like you say, and they're not taken into consideration. So calendars don't change; they're not flexible enough. There's an assumption that unless you've made it into an institute or been selected for a team, you may as well not go on. Even harder in days gone by if you're a woman. So all of that's got to change, and I'm pleased to see people like you who are studying and dedicating yourself to trying to be part of that change. I'm sure there's other reasons why you're doing it. So let's talk about your study. You took that time out, you got yourself your Bachelor of Exercise Science, and then you got a Master's in High Performance Sport. Was that field where you always wanted to end up in, or was it cycling that helped you get there, or what was the trigger?
Yeah. I don't know. It's a bit like a chicken or the egg, really, isn't it? I think, I did my work experience as a junior in high school. He's getting my terms confused here. At La Trobe, not La Trobe, at ACU. So, bit of backstory is my dad's a lecturer at ACU and has been for a number of years in nursing. But, I was probably like everybody else. I kind of got to year 10, year 11 and didn't really know what I wanted to do. Like, I had a bit of an idea, but loved sport. And he said, oh, well, how about you do your work experience week in exercise science? So that was probably my first introduction to the area. I didn't even know it was a thing then. And, I got exposed to different things like biomechanics labs, with force plates and, running gates and cameras, and then the physiology lab where they do like VO2 max testing, and just got a real understanding of, wow, there's a whole nother side to sport that I didn't even know existed. And then I probably, picked the right subjects at high school to give myself a few options, but again, didn't really know what that end goal looked like. But yeah, having done exercise science, I really enjoyed it. I loved the practical element of this, the subjects and the course. And I think, I wasn't riding at the time. I was still doing a lot of running, and, started going to the gym, and, had probably about a year or so at least where I wasn't really doing anything. I sort of transitioned more into the relaxed lifestyle and, needed a time away from sport. I think I wouldn't say burnt out, but I needed a rest from it. And I needed to find that sense of direction. And then so I kind of, used my sport in cycling. I was still coaching and doing some skills clinics and things at that time. So I never really took a step away from the sport. But then coming at the end of my degree, I had a better idea of how to approach training, what training looks like properly, what, the demand is, a bit more awareness about, being an athlete. So yeah, I think then I kind of also looked at it equally from, now I have all this practical experience from an athlete perspective. How can I use that to help me in my career? And exercise science is an interesting one. And I think, there's probably a few young people out there that are still doing this or doing this course. I've spoken to a few young cyclists who are interested in this area, and it's one of those courses that you really sort of need to make. It is what you make it. So, it's almost like an arts degree for science or sports science. So, you sort of have to do your undergrad, get a bit of a taste for what you could pursue, and then, do 1 or 2 years on top of that. So it's not like, nursing or paramedics or something that you walk into a job at the end of it, but it is very much, okay, now I've given myself a set of skills, and then, where can I take that? So yeah, I think if I hadn't have gone to uni, I probably wouldn't have come back to the sport. Yeah.
Interesting journey, and not surprising that when you discover the other side of the sport you're doing, it can become very interesting. Just on like the way you likened it to an arts degree, that makes sense to me, because the industries that you can go into are so diverse. I mean, sport has now grown to, probably too big a level, and this current situation is going to contract that. I think there's, if you look at, professional football, when you see how many coaches are in a box, and that's probably going to come back a bit now, but I still see it as very vibrant, because at a community level, council, etc., there's a whole need for participation and active participation. So there's certainly branching off into that. That's a possibility as well for people doing courses like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think if anything, that's far more realistic. And, we say this to our students all the time. And the number one thing you say first year, oh, why do you want to do this degree? Oh, I want to get into physio, or I don't want to work for an AFL team. And, it's great to hear that, but equally you can almost place your money on that. You're like, you probably won't be working in AFL, but you might be working at a community level. And I personally think community level participation sport is where, arguably you get more experience, because it's more hands-on, because as you said, there's not 6 coaches to do, every single task, but there's one coach and he'll do everything, or he or she will be doing everything. And so I guess your access to things at that level, you get far more hands-on experience. And I think, ultimately it is very rewarding. And I think you see it in the level of local sport has lifted, because there is that opportunity for people to practice what they learn in a profession. And yeah, like when we've got students going out on work experience, we're always telling them, like, go to a local club, go to your local club, and in whatever sport that is, and really just get a feel for it there, because that's where you can try things. You've got access to athletes, you've got a blank canvas essentially, and community sport needs that help and support, most definitely.
Yeah, and with the increase in accreditation and the need for accreditation, that everyone who's involved, or more and more people who are involved, have gone through some sort of pathway. I remember when I coached basketball for 10 years, and in my first year, I thought, well, first season actually, because you have 2 or 3 seasons in a year, I just thought, I can't do this. I thought I'd played the game, so that was enough. But I went and did a level 1, then a level 2 coaching course, and it changed me, and it certainly made me a better coach, obviously, but you have to have that theory behind you, then you have to put it into practice. But there are things that you just got no idea about, because you need to sit in a classroom, or need to be taught how to be a certain style of coach. And then you've got the mental side as well, which I'd like to now talk about a little bit more in depth about, firstly, how busy you are. When you've got this degree, it's amazing. Every interview I've read with you always uses the word busy, right?
Yeah, I'm getting less busy. I've got this under control, and then everyone goes, really? Or maybe not. I just pick up other things instead.
Yeah. I can relate to that as well. Sometimes I feel like I'm, full time as a president in a volunteer position, and I've got a real job as well. But but I'm not busy compared to you. On your LinkedIn profile, it reads like this: you're an academic tutor at La Trobe. And interesting that recently you've had to probably adopt education by Zoom, etc., which we can talk about. Probably associate coaching that you do at FTP training as well. That's probably had to be a little bit more remote as well. Are you still an instructor at Cycle Collective? Because I've gone through.
No, so it was funny when you mentioned my LinkedIn. I thought, oh God, I need to update that. But no, this was probably reflective of about a year and a half ago when I was doing all of these things. Yeah.
That's okay, because I remember some of those 6 a.m. classes and they hurt. So
I
I've
was going
got
to
to
say, you
remember.
know firsthand where I got my training programs for those from.
Yeah, so you can delete it from your LinkedIn profile, but I can't delete it from my memory. Some
Hopefully a
contract,
good memory.
good memories. So you're still doing any coaching with CV?
No, so I not at the moment. I've just organised or I partnered up with Bicycle Network to do the coaching for the upcoming Around the Bay, which is interesting. Like when you're talking about, shifting to isolation and working remotely and everything, and that, they approached me pretty much, I guess, at the start of the isolation period and said, hey, would really be interested in, working with you. And my first thing was, I thought, are we even having an Around the Bay? But then in hindsight, I've had some very good conversations with them, with Bicycle Network, and the guys there and the team are so passionate, and said, well, at the end of the day, if the event runs or not, people still need something to train for. So yeah, I haven't done much with Cycling Victoria for a while now. That was probably more, I guess, when I was trying to sort of establish myself before I started teaching at uni. But yeah, now that I have a full-time position at La Trobe, like that's pretty much takes up a lot of my time, which also means I don't have to juggle 6 different jobs. So I am very fortunate to have my position at work.
It sounds like a great position. And I've got a question about, because you've done some other things as well, and you've spent some time at Melbourne Storm. And so my son spent some time at Melbourne Storm when he was doing a degree in sport and recreation, diploma in sport and recreation, sorry, and just with the strength and conditioning department, Frank Panisi and the team there. And the Melbourne Storm are a great organisation. But you as a not cycling centric, but cycling is your sport, and obviously with FTP, it's cycling dominated. But do you feel that experience with another code, a more team orientated sport, etc., has made you a better coach?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's funny, like whenever I think back to Melbourne Storm, and I use them in my examples in class all the time, particularly in general principles of sport coaching, what I'm teaching at the moment. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, and that they're a great organisation, but the culture that they breed within their club is just next level. And I think I probably noticed it, I guess because I am a young female, and at the time, like I'm working with blokes that are literally like 4 times my size and quite intimidating. And the first meeting I ever had there, because so basically, a bit of backstory is I worked with the Storm as part of an internship for my master's degree. So I had a semester long placement there, but I ended up staying on for the entirety of the season. And I was working with the high performance team at the time, and they gave me a huge level of autonomy. They pretty much said, okay, we need a test that needs to tell us this, for the start of the season. And they said, you go away and work something and come back to us when you've got a proposal. And I was just like, what do you mean? And I was like stressing, and I pulled this proposal together. And I guess it was my first experience of what the real world of high performance sport really is. And, I think that in itself doesn't change depending on what sport you're in. Like high performance sport is high performance sport, and I went back to them with this proposal, and it was like a 20-minute test on a bike and blah, blah, blah. And they said, that's great, but you've got 7 minutes with our athletes. And I was like, okay, all right. So I have to go back to the drawing board. And, in hindsight, I developed this test that we used in, week out. And, and then I had to deliver it to the players. And I thought, oh my God, like not only are you getting me to design this thing, I now have to stand up in front of 25 full grown men, and here's little me saying, can you pedal your watt bike at, 200 watts for 5 minutes? I just thought it was quite daunting, but I think I learned so much about culture and what a team environment can do for a person, not just as an athlete, but also just as an individual. And, like they've got their club slogan written up on the wall, and they do everything together. They're extremely family oriented, which I'm, sure your son has shared this same insights with you. And just the level of professionalism was fantastic. And I just thought, this is the type of environment that regardless of what sport you're in, you just want to be around, because that's contagious. And I think, coming back to cycling, you realize that it's the same whether it's an individual sport or a team sport, and cycling is such a team sport. So I think there's definitely, you can learn a lot from different codes and take a lot away from different coaches, because I think regardless of the sport that you're in, that coaching philosophy and those exceptional coaches that do their job really well, or, professionals in whatever capacity in elite sport, you can jump into any sport, and a good coach could do that. So yeah, I think I learned so much from Melbourne Storm in 6 months, more, probably arguably more in that 6 months with that placement than I did in 4 years of uni. Just, you got to get your hands dirty and really witness it. So yeah, it was hugely eye-opening experience, but one that I would definitely recommend to anyone who gets the opportunity to work at a club like that.
That's wonderful to hear, because I looked at that club. I've looked at that club for a long time, obviously with Santo working there, but just even when I was at News, they were part owners of Storm. We used to go to a lot of games, and I still remember the day after they had their premierships script. It was the opening day at Amy Stadium, and they defiantly went out and trained and decided that they were going to play that whole season for no points. But they turned up a few days later at what was then Etihad Stadium and beat the Warriors 44-0. And it was just incredible, because they went through that whole season, and someone hasn't done it yet, but there will be a movie about that. But I think that goes back to that philosophy that you're talking about. And I'm glad that you got to experience it, because I do think it makes you a better coach. I've never been coached by you, but that has to have an effect on someone, and the way you just spoke about it to me answered that question. So thanks for that. That's the answer I wanted to hear, actually. I was hoping that that's what you would say, and I'm glad you did.
Yeah, and like, I've spoken to a few people that have worked there, and one of my fellow lecturers as well, he did a season there after I had finished, and yeah, says the same thing. Like, we use them as an example all the time of just what professional sport is. Yeah.
Terrific. So you've got that professional experience. You've done your education, your lecturing yourself. But if we go back, there was a bit of a coaching bug that may have been with you a bit earlier. I know that one of your greatest fans, Cam McFarlane, another great Brunswick man. Obviously,
I think I'm probably one of his biggest fans.
Well, he loves you, and he said that you accompanied him to a couple of camps, CV camps, and also a camp in Alice Springs. What's your memory of those camps?
Oh wow! I think I've probably got too many memories to sort of put in one little sentence. But I think the thing that stood out for me with those camps was just, I think trying not to centre them around Cam, obviously, because at the end of the day it is a camp with lots of people involved. But he's such a huge inspiration to a lot of people, and a very large figure, and gets so passionate about what he does. And I remember just that passion just shone through. His level of preparedness, and always thinking about the kids first, as in, like, how are they going to get the most out of themselves, or how can we teach them? And it might not be what has always been done, but Cam doesn't care. And I think, like, in a good way, like, it's he tests the way of how kids exposes them to different ways of thinking and interacting, and just really cares about them so much. And that's probably one thing that I took away from it. And yeah, we went to Alice Springs, and that was huge for me. Like, I'd never been to Alice Springs before, and obviously seen it, on the TV and stuff. And I just, like, we'd never met these kids before either. But I think, if anything, that camp was a hugely humbling experience for me, because, equally, like, these kids just love to ride their bikes. Like, they just had this love for the sport. And, I don't know how to say this without being politically incorrect, but because they didn't have access to a lot of facilities, they just took it for what it was, and they just rode their bike, from dusk till dawn until whatever they were allowed to, and they were just kids. And, like, I wasn't that old at the time. Like, I was pretty young, and, that whole experience of just watching them develop, even over the course of, I can't even remember how many days we were there now. It wasn't that long, but just the progression from when they started with us to when they finished. And, that wouldn't have been possible without, someone like Cam, who just really invests so much into those that he's working with. And yeah, I think you need more people like that at a community level, but then equally at an elite level, to keep us all grounded. I think we can all appreciate that Cam's very good at doing that. And, if we look at his relationship with Luke, for example, and, I know obviously in the interview you talked about Cam with Luke, so I don't need to say it all again, but, listening to that, I was like, yeah, like that is what juniors need. You need that love and that vibe and just that passion, because otherwise you lose sight of the sport very quickly, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if we can. I don't know if we'll be allowed to ever clone Cam. It might blow up the lab, but there'd be we need more people like Cam. There's no doubt about it. So you've got you've got this great lead up to what you're doing. I believe with the experience you had with people like Cam and Alf and Alan, as you said before, all great people, and all practice the same thing, that you've got to first enjoy something, not take it too seriously, but I suppose when you need to put your head down, you do. Your own racing, there's so many highlights as I read out at the start, but I'm a big fan, as many people are, of the one-day races, whether they're the European ones or our ones in Australia. And the Grafton Timberell's a magnificent bike race, and you finished third last year in the women's Grafton Timberell. What was that like? And
wow,
what was
yeah,
the training like as well for that?
It's funny because when you said, like, I don't know what's harder, the race that on the day or the training leading up to it. But those that know me know that I'm pretty notorious for doing long Ks and solo Ks, and I don't know what it is about it. I just love it. Like, I love doing long, hard rides and pushing myself and sort of discovering a lot about myself along the way. And at this point, I had already attempted one Melbourne to Warrnambool. I'd done a lot of longer rides like the Murray to Moyne, and a few other sort of, I guess, endurance events, real sort of ones that sort of test your limits. And yeah, I said to my DS last year, I might have even said it the year before, that I wanted to do Grafton. Like, as soon as I saw the boys were doing it and the NRS race, I was like, I need to do that. Like, that is something that's on my bucket list. And yeah, I went up and stayed with my DS, who lives on the Gold Coast, so it wasn't too much travel for us. But flew up on a Friday and yeah, pinned a number on. And I think the thing that appealed to me about the Grafton was that there was a women's race. It was within the men's race, but the fact that it was a graded race, I thought, for something that's such an unknown for particularly for a female athlete, like not playing the female card, but just the pure challenge of doing something for that long at such a high intensity with a bunch of grown men is quite daunting. And I thought, okay, if we're riding off with C grade men, it's not like the Warnie that you have the potential. There's so many unknowns of your race is very much dictated by how the men race, whereas this one I was like, I feel like this is a bit more achievable. So yeah, I went up there and raced it, and we had, I think, 10 or 11 women from memory. I can't remember exactly. And we rolled off with men C. And yeah, so for those that haven't done Grafton, there's a dirty great big hill halfway through. And I think, I was a bit surprised at the lack of men pulling turns before we got to the climb. And then I just, held on for dear life and got tailed off over the middle climb. And it was a horrendously windy day. And I remember I had already gone into it, even little things like I'd never had to take feed bags like that before in a race. I hadn't actually told my DS that until the night before, when he said, "Now, you've done this before, haven't you?" And I was like,
Sure.
Yeah, sure I have. So I think that was a bit of I have to get that right. And I knew how important nutrition was, and I knew I'd done the training, and I knew that I would get to the finish. I just had this feeling. I was like, I know I'm going to be able to do this. And I honestly went in and I wanted to win, and I had looked at the start list and I thought, yeah, I could potentially win this. And anyway, there was one of the other ladies, and she took off up this hill and managed to hold on to the men. And that was where my race sort of, I guess, I first thought, oh God, there goes the win. Off she goes. See you later, And then was halfway, and then we had this horrendous headwind. And I remember I was in a bunch with maybe like 20 men to start, and no one was pulling turns. And I was with the eventual winner of the female race, and she she's probably did maybe a third or half the amount of turns as I did. And, in hindsight, she played her cards very right. Whereas I was like, if I don't pull turns, we're never going to get to the finish. We're never going to catch the group in front. And at that point, I was just so hell-bent on just doing what I could to get to the finish as quickly as possible, because this headwind, I was doing the maths in my head. I'm like, we're going to be out here for like 9 hours the rate we're going, But I think the biggest thing I learned in that race was that anything can happen in a bike race, So at one point, I think we were like 9 or 10 minutes down from the lead woman at the time. And then slowly but surely, like 60K to go, 50K to go, we just kept, she'd been dropped off her bunch, and the finish and the win was more in sight. And then, yeah, we got to those last few set of rollers, and my legs just fell apart. Like, it was within the last 5Ks. And, you hear these stories all the time of people saying, oh, I fell apart. And I literally did. And I was so tired, and like, I wasn't even hungry. I think I was just so, I cooked myself. I'd run out of gas, you know. The men I was with were like, come on, you're almost there. And they were great. It was great camaraderie on the road, but I just thought, I literally can't hold the wheel. And unfortunately, that meant that, you know, the group I was in, I tailed off them, and they actually caught the female leader. And, you know, I came in a couple of minutes down, I think, from memory. And but those last 3Ks, I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to get to the finish. I'm going to be one of those scenes like in a marathon where they're crawling over. But yeah, I made it to the finish and I got third. So I got to stand on that podium. And I think, to be honest, that third was as much of a win for me than anything else. And, you know, it also meant that now next time I want to do it, I'm definitely going in with the mentality of, you know, I really want to win it. And I think now I've done it for the first time. I know that you have to get over the climb, you know, with the front bunch, and that was where I need to work on. So I think it's an interesting event with those ones, because you almost have to do it and not win. Obviously, a lot of people won't win the first time or ever, you know, but you have to do it to experience it. And then you go back to the drawing board and go, right, where were my gaps? What do I need to do better? Yeah, so fingers crossed we get one this year. But in saying that, now they've announced that it's going to be a female NRS race. And so that changes it all again entirely, because now we might have a group of 40 to 80 women, but it's only us. So we're not holding on to the men. So I think that in itself is going to change the dynamics completely. But yeah, I don't know. I love the long, hard ones. I'm not sure, maybe it makes me mad. I'm not sure.
Maybe you've got to be touched, but like most people who go in those races, they don't just do it once. You know, even if it hurts them, and I suppose you can't do a recce of a course like that, right? You can only do it by racing, and that's where you learn what you learn. But I watched something on GCN not long ago, rating the monuments in Europe, and which one was the hardest to win. And they worked out that Roubaix was the hardest because no one's ever won it the first time, and the average was 4.5 times or something like that. So you've got to have raced it 4 times at least before you win it.
Okay.
And that was how they determined it was the hardest race to win. I can't remember which one was the easiest, but I mean, none of them are easy, but you know, on a degree of difficulty, you know, it was obviously the one that was the hardest. And I guess you've got the Warney and Grafton Timber, our two versions of that. And there's plenty of other races, and unfortunately many other races that over the years have disappeared. Melbourne to Yarrawonga, Melbourne to Lakes Entrance, etc. as well. But all huge races, and I credit to you for finishing it, for coming third, and your efforts in the Warnies. I mean, they've been fantastic too. And you're an ITT specialist who's finishing on the podium in a 200k plus race. It's madness. How do you do that? How can you be both?
I don't know. I think it's the same sort of mentality, though. I think anything with time trialing is it's about the process, and I think, you know, it's about the process and just hurting for a really long time, and you know it's going to hurt, and you just kind of push through that. And yeah, I don't know whether it's, you know, physically because I'm, you know, more suited to TTs. I kind of fell into TTs. I never, you know, woke up one day and thought, oh, I really like time trials. You know, I kind of just I guess, you know, accidentally just found myself doing well in them because I've got a good VO2 max. I'm good at pushing myself. I used to do lots of runs as a kid, and like just that sort of pushing on. I'm a bit of a diesel, so I think naturally, you know, like people discover they're good at certain aspects. And you know, I sort of did a few time trials, and I was never great when I started. I didn't think I knew actually how hard to push, or you know what hard was. And I've had similar conversations with people I've coached. You know, they get to the end of a time trial and they're like, well, I probably could have gone a bit harder. And I'm just like, you know, you can't do that with a time trial. And I think the more I learned about myself as an athlete, the better I became at time trials. And it is a process. Like it's a process in that you know exactly what you have to do, what power you have to hold, what speed, what equipment, what the wind's doing. Like there's no room for error. But equally, you can have a bad day, but at the end of the day, whatever you do on the day is the best that you can do. So that's quite a foreign concept, I think, because a lot of bike racing, there's a lot of other variables, but time trials, you can be the best that you can be on the day and it's not good enough, or equally, you know, you can have an absolute perler and it's better than everybody else. So yeah, it's a bit of a roulette as well. I think that's probably why I like it, because it's just so many unknowns. And it's interesting because I think, you know, people say, oh, you're a time trialist, but time trials are so dependent on the course as well, you know, and I think we saw that this year in that the Nationals course changed, and it just completely changed the dynamic of both the men's and the women's race. And, arguably it's not a purist time trials course. Like there was a lot of, ups and downs and turns and all sorts of things, a lot more technical than just an out and back. But yeah, I think if you're a successful time trialist, you need to be able to adapt to pretty much any condition.
We did it in the team's time trial, that course, and it hurt a bunch of old guys, let me tell you. So I can't say we're through the same pain as you, but gee, when we got to that first hill outside the uni, I went, oh, really? Like, because you just go out of the gate so quick, and you just, you're pumped up, and you get to that, and yeah. Anyway, we'll do it all again next year, hopefully. But you're a terrific time trialist, and you've got a really great consistent record, and you have been beaten by full-time pros, and I think that says a lot to be able to finish with them, seconds off. We're not talking multiple minutes. Average speeds 41, 42, 43 k now. That's unbelievable. So your racing's been great. You've done so many things. You haven't ventured off into Europe other than for some touring, which is something we'll talk about in a sec. But you've raced in China.
Yes, yeah. It's funny. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I'm probably one of the few people that's been involved at an NRS level for so long now, but hasn't taken that step overseas for racing. And a lot of people have asked me, like, why don't you? And all. I've got various reasons why I haven't. But yeah, we were fortunate that with Specialized, what year was it? Was it last year? Year before? I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been a while. That we got the chance to, actually, yeah, it was the year before. It was 2 years ago. We got the opportunity and invite to race in China. And look, my race was very short-lived. I got food poisoning after the first stage and spent a very unfortunate 48 hours not feeling too flash. But the whole experience in itself in going to China was just so eye-opening. And, arguably the racing didn't really suit us. It was quite fast. It was, huge highways. But I think probably if you ask any of us on the team, it wasn't the racing that we remember. It was everything else, and getting a taste of, elite racing, but in Asian racing is so different. And, then you've got the cultural differences, and just like, even though I, didn't race the entire race, I still got out on my bike once I was feeling better for like the last couple of days. I was able to go out and explore a bit. And, that's something I think you're so fortunate with racing a bike as a sport, that you, regardless of the level you're at, if you have the opportunity to race overseas, you get to see so much within that opportunity. It's not like going to an overseas sports stadium, staying in a hotel, playing in a stadium, coming back and then flying out. Like, by default, you see a lot of the different cultures. So yeah, it's funny. I never would have put China on my list of places to go. And to be honest, I probably wouldn't go back there for a holiday, but I definitely think that the experience in itself was something I'm really glad I had the opportunity for. Yeah.
Yeah. And that whole Asian tour scene is growing, and obviously a little bit of a setback now with all racing, but even speaking to my cousin with his time at Drapac and even the tour of Iran and those sorts of destinations that you never would have thought would be places you race. I mean, who would have thought the tour of Oman would be a big race, etc. You're just racing in the desert. But I guess money makes a difference too. But all those things are a cultural experience. So you've had this wonderful life so far, I reckon, where you've experienced things on both sides, and you've been able to take a step back and look at the sport but from a different angle. What's the next 10 years like for you? What are you thinking? 2 years. Let's go two at a time.
10 years, my goodness. The next two. Look, to be honest, I honestly don't know how much longer I'll be racing at this level for. And I think it's so hard to plan at the moment. Given the situation of the state of affairs of everything, but. I think I'll keep going as long as I keep enjoying it. And right now I am enjoying my racing. I think in the last 2 years, I've really sort of transitioned into, probably, I don't know how you would say it. It probably comes back to, how you define yourself as a person. And, I used to say, I'm a cyclist, but now I define myself as a lecturer. And I think I've found my niche in my profession, that I love teaching. I love, being a lecturer. And, you know, in order for me to continue that, I'm probably going to most likely have to begin my PhD within a few years. You know, I'm incredibly lucky that where I work is very supportive of my racing, and you know, they've pretty much said to me, don't give up your racing until you're ready. Like, there's plenty of time for a PhD. So, you know, I think probably at least for the next couple of years, I'd like to keep racing. That's probably going to depend on what the racing calendar looks like. But yeah, I think the next 2 years I probably will have started my PhD. I've sort of started thinking about areas in which I would like to explore with my research. But equally, I've seen, you know, my dad's done one. I know a lot of other people that have done them, and I think I'm not in a rush to do a PhD because I know how consuming it can be, and I think it would be a real shame to do it for the sake of doing it rather than do it, you know, to have, you know, have a contribution to an area that I'm interested in. I think is so important. So yeah, I don't know. Come back to me in 2 years, but I reckon I probably will have transitioned less into still competing at this level. But equally, I think I'm always going to ride bikes. And you know, I was actually having this chat with Luke of all people a few weeks ago, and we were talking about motivation. And you know, it was more when I was asking him about, you know, how he's feeling with Tokyo and everything. And he was like, well, how are you going? And I just thought, I haven't even stopped to think what my motivation is. And I think I'm lucky that I enjoy training just as much as I enjoy racing. So I know that even if I'm not pinning on a number, I'll still be riding probably as much, if not more. And it's funny, I think of people like, you know, Mark O'Brien, who are doing everything now. And, you know, he's riding phenomenally well, and, you know, arguably like probably the best that he ever has been. And every time you speak to anyone, they're like, oh yeah, Marco was flying, you know. And I think I'd like to be like that in about 2 years, you know, like race for the love of it. You know, you don't have to race, but you can race, still be coaching. And yeah, just really finding that balance is probably what I'm trying to finally get to.
Oh, well, you're always going to be fit and healthy because that's what you do. I mean, you love doing it, right? Just even talking to Wes Sulzberger a while ago, when he gave up, or when he stopped being a pro, you know, took up running and just, you know, decided to go in I think it was a 50K race around the Tan, and just thought, I may as well do 100, you know. So, yeah. You know, some people are just motivated by continuing to push themselves, and you seem that way. I think you've got, you know, the world at your feet, Kate, to be honest, and you're very well grounded. That's clear. The last bit before we put on, rather than doing word association, we're just going to do photo association because that works better. Just one. I said before that you hadn't raced in Europe, but you have done a lot of riding in Europe. What are some of your best experiences of riding in Europe?
Riding in Europe, I really, I don't know. I've had a few. I really enjoyed. I've got family in Germany, so on the pretty much the Belgium-German border, and I really enjoyed doing some of the classics routes around there. Yeah, we sort of were fortunate we could go across the border and explore, and that sort of gave me a real taste of, you know, like, wow, these are the roads that, you know, the pros have raced on, and I had one of those like fangirl moments. And you know, even Italy, I've done some, you know, riding around like Lake Como and around there. And I think that was amazing. The countryside around there is fantastic. And, you know, there's arguably a lot of places I'd go back to. Like I've, you know, visited Girona quite briefly, and I know that's sort of the cycling mecca for all the Australians that go over there, but you can see why. Like the roads are fantastic. The weather's glorious. The vibe's so relaxed. And yeah, I don't know. I'd probably like to explore a lot more of Italy. I think, you know, there's a lot of places I haven't ticked off, but I am very lucky that I've got family over in Germany, so I can sort of base myself there quite easily. So yeah, watch this space. I'm hoping to get back over there once the restrictions have lifted, for sure.
Yeah, there isn't a person I know who rides a bike who doesn't want to go to Europe, you know, either again or, like in my case, shamefully, I've never been. I was 10 years old when I went to Italy. And,
really?
you know, yeah, it's something that needs to be addressed. And I was saying to Ali the other day in her interview that unfortunately will take a couple of years now to get there. But yeah, you just wish you'd done it beforehand. But yeah, it's so beautiful. Yeah. And I love watching the old, not so much the old, but just the races of the past, the Giro stages that they're showing on GCN and the SBS coverage recently. It just reminds you of how beautiful it must be, but even down Flanders, etc. So there's so many parts of Europe where, you know, to ride a bike and to watch a bike race would just be unreal.
Yeah, I definitely my bucket list is just a tour, get a touring bike, you know. And I think, you know, just plod along, stop and see. Like I've got a good friend of mine has, you know, pretty much moved offline, off the grid for the last couple of years now. And Angus, one of the FTP coaches, and yeah, he just works remotely, has a bike, and just rides around the world. And I just think, my God, like I'd love to do that. It scares me to the absolute, you know, Billy-O, but I think, yeah, that'd be the ultimate. That's probably what I really like to do, I think.
Yeah, I reckon there's a lot of people thinking that way at the moment. You know, what's it all about? And maybe I should just go, you know, off the grid as well.
Nothing like a pandemic to get you thinking.
That's right. There is nothing. Not that we've ever had to experience one before, but it's certainly changed, and so it should. It's changed the way we think about a lot of things, and probably not for this conversation about how too far down the capitalist route we've gone. We might be accused of being socialist, but I think there's a lot to address. Let's finish this on a bright note. I've got some random photos that I'm going to put up, and I just want you to give me, just give me your thoughts on each photo as I put them up.
All right. That's a good opening one. I think that sums up Brunswick very nicely, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, that Nationals course. And it's funny, actually, that you've put that photo up. I think, you know, Nationals is one of those events that is so, you know, huge for so many cyclists. And, like, I think particularly for me as a female cyclist, it's, you know, I don't know, I almost say to the boys, like, I admire your dedication to racing nationals. And I mean this in the nicest way possible, but, you know, it's always the pros that win, like the men's race, you know, arguably, like for the last couple of years at least. And, you know, for us as a female cyclist, like, it's one of those races that you kind of, you know, you do the hard work and you think, shit, I might win this. Like, you got to go in with that mentality. Otherwise, you know, why do you pin a number on, really? But the thing I really like about Nationals each year is the Brunswick corner, because no matter where you are at in the field, you can hear them, you know. And like, I think it was last year or maybe even the year before, you know, once I'd tailed off and, you know, my race was done and, you know, they had holding a snag up in a sandwich, and I was like, no, you need to give me a gin. I was like, that's not strong enough. Next lap. You know? So I think, yeah, I really like that vibe, and I think it's so important for all of us competing that, you know, at the end of the day, it is just a bike race, and these guys on that car and, you know, waving the flags and, you know, shouting the horns and all the things that they do, like, that's bike racing, and you can't lose sight of that. And if you can have that much fun in arguably the hardest race of the year, you know, the biggest pinnacle of Australian racing, like, yeah, that's why we ride bikes.
That's exactly right. We're going to try and get that corner heritage listed at some point.
Oh, you definitely need one.
Well, this one, right. There's your Murray de Moyne.
That's my Murray de Moyne. I feel like I've pulled that face in many a situation before. I think, yeah, for those that don't know, the Murray de Moyne, it's essentially a very long relay race, and, you know, you're riding money. You're riding for charity, raising money for a very good cause, but it's a very long day in the saddle. And I actually don't know if that was probably pre-ride, where I was thinking, what have I signed up for, or post-ride when I thought, what have I just done? Yeah. But yeah, community sport. I think you can tell by my oversized jersey that was a number of years ago. But
2007, and I think you did it again in 2019.
I've done quite a few now. Yeah, I think I've probably done about 5 or 6. Not all back to back, but I definitely keep coming back. And this year I actually had taken over. So Dad was, you know, managing the team for a number of years, and I sort of handed the reins over to me, and I thought, yep, I want to give this a crack. And I, you know, was working behind the scenes, getting it up and running. We're all ready to go. And then obviously the event got cancelled, but it's a great event. Yeah. Murray de Moyne's something pretty special for me for that, but probably not at that exact moment.
I love that photo though. And so I did know the bit about that you were managing the team. So that's just another thing you do in your spare time, obviously, because you've got
it's funny actually, because you talk about, you know, being busy, and I almost had to sort of force it out of Dad's hands to an extent. And, you know, because he had this thing that every year he'd be like, this is my last year, I'm stepping back next year. And then, you know, next year rolled around and Dad would take the reins. I thought, right, I'm going to help him do this. And, you know, so I sort of took a bit of prying, but yeah, I think it was something that I took on because I love it. And I think, you know, when you love something, it's not really work. And, you know, I kind of was able to fortunately build upon my event management skills that I already had. I didn't really think it was going to take too much, but under the careful guidance of Dad, I think I was in a good place, and hopefully I can try and pry it away from him again next year.
Well, he might be keen to get it back because he's missed this year, but you never know. You could co-manage it maybe.
No, we could co-manage. Yeah, bit of family dynamics.
Not a bad one, that one. So this one here is an interesting one for me because,
Yes.
I think we spoke off air that it might not be the year that I thought it was, but these round the bay races or rides that Mercedes-Benz Berwick does. I know we sponsor them at Car Sales, and Craig Howard, who's the bigger guy, Craig won't mind me saying that, with the headband, and Simon Coffin from Total Rush, and you're wedged in between these two big men. What's your memory of these sorts of rides? Because I've got a memory of you in the subsequent ride.
Oh yes, I think we captured that, the rose between two thorns, that photo, and I think probably my immediate relationship with Simon. I've known Simon for many years, and he really helped me get back into racing when I was got back into the NRS. I rode for the Total Rush women's team for 2 years, and I've got a great working relationship with Simon. And yeah, I think he asked me with a number of us to basically chaperone this ride each year, and I think I've probably done, I don't know, maybe 3, possibly 4, I can't remember. But I always just have so much fun on these rides, and the banter's great, and he always tells me that I'm the witch that yells at everybody and keeps everybody in line. But I think it's a big responsibility to have on the road, but it's a great day, and I think it, like, you've obviously been on this ride and a number of them, and the sense of achievement at the end, regardless of whether you're in the fast bunch, the middle bunch, or the bunch that's taking their time. I think that stopping for breakfast halfway is really great. I love it. And yeah, it's always a good day out. But yeah, what you alluded to there, I think it was the year after this where we had those horrendous conditions, and it was like the windiest day I think it is the windiest day I've ever been on my bike. Apart from Tour of Tassie last year, I think that probably gave it a run for its money. But yes, I got to, I think it was about Brighton, maybe Sandringham, and I literally got blown into a parked car, and I thought, you know what? I am done. I do not have to do this. Maybe it's because I was considerably lighter than a few other people. I'm not sure, but I just thought, I don't really think this is what I signed up for. Thanks.
No, and you made the right decision, because it was extremely windy. And I remember we were in Chelsea, and we were at the lights, and the real estate agent's neon sign, Rain and Horn Chelsea, just blew off and almost knocked us out. That's how windy it was. But I do recall you, because I was in your group, so it would have been one of the 3 or 4 faster groups. Because my theory is always go in a faster group, because if you get dropped, you've got one behind you, right? But you hardly get dropped, because the way you do it as chaperones, you don't let anyone do any work. So you were always at the front. So I can understand how you just, you had to be at the front on this very windy day, and you are light, and it was just horrendous. So you were the lucky one, because then we all grouped together in Frankston and had to ride back as one group of about 100 riders, which was incredibly dangerous, because there were varying skill levels. And so a few of us just took off and went up and thought we'd work harder in a group of 5 or 6, but we'll be safer. But I still remember the sand coming in from the beach as we were going through Mordialloc, etc. It was just unbelievable. And
it's funny because, yeah, anyone that knows me knows that I loathe, I try and not ride beach road any more than 5 times in a year, if that. And, this is probably one of those rides that I actually go down beach road, and after that year I was like, oh, this is no thanks.
No, I honestly reckon I do it once a year, and it's on this ride.
Yeah.
I'm happy to go past there, but that stretch there is crazy.
It's pretty dicey.
Got 2 more to go. One, they're both very special. Everyone loves Elf, and obviously,
Elf.
Yeah. And so, what are your memories of Elf? Sorry.
Oh, I have a lot of memories of Elf, and I was again chatting to a friend of mine about Elf the other day, actually, and one of the saddest days is probably when I was at his funeral. And I think, obviously everyone says you try not to think about, the sad times, but, Alf was such an influential figure for me. And, he was probably, I think it was when I was, I don't know, maybe under 15s, under 17s, I can't remember exactly. But, I remember Monday nights with Alf at the track, and, he'd get there before everybody else, and he'd hang around for a chat afterwards. And, he taught me more about myself as an athlete that I didn't even realize at the time. Simple things like, we'd be doing sprint drills, and he'd blow the whistle, and then he'd get chatting, and he'd forgot to blow the next whistle to stop. So we're doing 4 laps later, I'm sprinting, and I'm thinking I can't sprint any longer. And he'd be like, oh, sorry, blows the whistle. And, you know, again, notoriously, like I'd be, you know, grimacing and he'd be like, stop smiling, you know, and I'd be like, it's not a smile, it's a grimace. You know? So I think Alf was great because, you know, we come back to, you know, the influential figures, and he treated everybody the same, you know, and I think for a young female in a male-dominated sport, it was so refreshing, and I didn't realize at the time, but that's probably, I think, one of the biggest things. Like, he just treated me like a bike rider and a kid that loves to ride bikes, and you know, he did that with everyone. And you know, I think as his health got worse, and you know, he got older and everything, and you know, you saw him deteriorate, and he was still there. You know, he was there until the very end because he just loved it, and you could just see that in him. And you know, the number of people that, you know, have fond memories of him, I think, is testament to that. But yeah, that was probably one of the saddest days when Alf passed. But you know, I think it's so nice that the club still, you know, he's still there. He's still there every night, every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday. Like, people like that don't leave ever. And yeah, he's an amazing man.
Yeah, Paul Amerigo took on the reins of Monday training in honour of Alf to keep up what Alf had started Mondays, and with the club rooms, the pavilion is now named after Alf as well. So obviously, you know, we do what we can. We've got the race, the Alf Walker race every year too, which is, you know, it's
gorgeous though. Like, yeah, particularly like even the other morning I was, you know, commuting along the bike path, and yeah, the sun was coming up over Brunswick, and it sounds very cliche, but then there was the Alf Walker, you know, stand sign, and I just, yeah, it's amazing when you come across people like this in your life, and you just have those little fleeting moments and memories. And yeah, it was very special, very special.
Yeah, and I think it's up to us to continue to keep that memory alive for the people who didn't get to know him. It's the same with someone like Pop Stewart. So it's a year ago today that we ran Pop Stewart's memorial last year. My daughter reminded me this morning that it was this time last year, and to think that we are unable to run Alf's race or Pop's is just really sad in some ways, but we still need to remember them in other ways, because they were both such big characters and huge influence, not just on Brunswick, but cycling in general. The last one I'm going to put up is this one, because I would imagine this is special for you. When was this?
Well, that was same year that I almost got the Rose Between Two Thorns picture was, but that was my first ever NRS win, that one there. So that was when Amy's was, I can't remember whether it was a classic at this point, because before it became the Amy's Otway Tour, it was essentially two standalone races, and I'm pretty sure this was the first year they made it a tour, in that we had the crit the day before, and then the hilltop finish. And this is when we still went in the direction of, we finished up Ben Warren, and yeah, it was I'm pretty sure it was my first win. Yeah, it was huge moment for me, and it was funny actually. I remember, like, it was one of those races where I was riding on a team with Ruth Corset at the time, and I was, you know, essentially helping her, and that was the role that I had. And you know, we'd made front bunch, and we went up the first Dean's Marsh climb, and you know, I was on the front, and we'd split the bunch, and then I, you know, pretty much did a lot more work on the front for whatever reason. There wasn't a lot of people wanting to work, and then we got to the corner just before the Ben Warren climb, which I think is about 12k to go, and I just thought, well, I'm going to whack it. I'm going to go now, and the plan was that I basically went and then, you know, force everybody else to chase, and then Ruth would sit on, and that was our plan, you know. And I ended up staying away, and it was probably, I had done it a few times before, so I knew that climb pretty well, but I still remember, I think it might have been a K and a half to go, maybe even 2Ks. And Doug Armstrong was the chief comm, and he came up beside me, and I think he must have said 4 or 5Ks to go, and I just gave him this look, and I was like, sorry, what? You know, and then he went, oh no, sorry, I mean 1.5 or whatever it was. And to this day, I think, like, you know, I have very good memories with Doug from a number of races, but that's still probably one of my fondest memories of, what do you mean I have to ride further than I thought I did? But that was a huge win for me, and the first time that I just genuinely believed, like, wow, like, I've done it. I've been pushing on in this sport for so long, and you know, I had a few NRS seasons by then, and I was always close, but I never got that win. And yeah, it was pretty cool. I don't think you could wipe a smile off my face for about a month.
Massive win, and not long after they changed the direction of the course. So
yes, and to this day I keep saying, why don't we just go back the other way?
I like that, because the other way you get a climb too early for someone like me, that's no good at all. But
it's very, yeah, and I think it's interesting. It changes the complete dynamics of that race. Like, it's raced very differently. And, you know, I think a couple of years later, you know, a similar role, I was playing the role of it, you know, to split it early, up and wearing in the other direction. And we ended up staying away for almost the entirety of the stage until, you know, we hit the Great Ocean Road. And yeah, I think no matter which way you race that course, it's challenging. But yeah, I personally like to see it go back this way.
Yeah, I think you got a few supporters on that one. Mate, Kate, I think it's time we wrap up. We could probably talk all day, because I could talk a lot more about the coaching side and the studying side. Very, very interesting, and I'd like to think this isn't the last time we're going to do it, because they're getting a good response to these interviews, and I'm really pleased that you could make it. You've been a terrific contributor to the club. You keep donating kit and equipment. I mean, your smile lights up the room, and it's just it's wonderful. Whether it's your posts or the blogs that you're doing, the podcasts that you've started, and we'll put all these links on so that people can listen to them. But I'm really inspired by listening to you. The reason why you say you started the podcast is so you could help your own students. That's just, you know, that's just wonderful, and it says a lot about a person. So as I've been doing the last few times, I've been asking the guests to sign off. So
I missed that part. I'm not ready for this.
No, well, it's on the spot to, you know, so it's a bit like, it's not like a TT. You can't measure your power here. It's on the spot. Something's happened. Someone's changed the course on you, and now you've got to finish the race, right? So just 30 seconds or whatever it takes. I'm giving it to you to sign off.
To sign off, well, I guess firstly I'd like to say a big thank you for having me. And I think, you know, as you said, we could probably talk for hours, and it's probably reflective of my love for not only the sport but the passion for Brunswick. And I think, you know, my parting probably words, I don't even know if this is what people are doing when they're signing off, but anyone that's watching or listening, whether you're a junior or, you know, someone who's been around the club for a long time, I think keeping yourself grounded at a club level and really never losing sight of why you ride a bike is so important. And I think, you know, never stop having fun, because when you stop having fun, then, you know, that's when I think it stops, and you probably need to move on. But I think for the time being, just keep doing what you're doing, because, you know, there's a reason why you jump on a bike.
Love it. It's a great way to finish. Thanks a lot, Kate.
No worries, Ag. Thank you.
Thank you.